They won, so they played again half an hour later, so we got to see.
We'll call the meeting to order for the Wicomico County Council Legislative Session 2022-13 for June 21st, 2022. Those that would like to stand and join us in the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance, please do.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could, before we get started, I would like to have a moment of silence for Deputy First Class Glenn Hilliard and his family. Thank you very much. Thank you.
If I may, just to tell you, I was at a baseball tournament, and the Titans traveling team from this area have all new hats with Hilliard's name on the back, his badge number, and a black flag on the other side.
That's great to hear.
They have somebody in their group is a police officer.
Good to hear. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. First item on the agenda, entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda has been approved unanimously. Good morning, Ms. Hurley.
Good morning, Mr. President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. The first item on the agenda this morning is Resolution Number 69-2022. This is confirming a director for the Local Management Board, also known as the Bacamako Partnership for Families and Children. You will notice that there is a blank line in the resolution. A motion will need to be made to the resolution to insert the name of the individual that council would like to appoint as the director.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution 69-2022.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay,
Make a motion to insert the name.
I said a name, Larry.
Yeah, we would need the name. Thank you, Larry.
I got a brain cramp.
It's all right.
Jamie Riley.
So somebody else. Thank you.
Excuse me?
Jamie Riley.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Amendment is approved. Any further discussion on Resolution 69-2022?
She's over there grinning.
Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
All those in favor of Resolution 69-2022 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution 69-22 as amended passes unanimously. Congratulations. Glad to have you here.
Next for your consideration is Resolution Number 70-2022. This is approving a priority letter for the Maryland Department of Transportation's fiscal year 2023-2028 Consolidated Transportation Program. Council did have a work session on this request on June the 7th, and we have Mr. Tony Rudy here, who's the airport manager, and Mr. Mark Whitelock, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution 70-2022.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Next item for business is Resolution Number 71-2022. This is approving a utility easement between Wacomico County, Maryland and Marva Power and Light Company for property binding upon Brick Kiln Road, also known as County Tax Map 28, Parcel 43. And we have Mr. Mark Whitelock here, Deputy Director of Public Works, if there are any questions.
In motion from council to approve Resolution 71-2022.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion. Anybody need any clarification? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 71-2022, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried, resolution passes.
Okay, next is Resolution Number 72-2022. This is proposing the amendment of various sections of the Wacomico County Charter. And council has also had various work sessions on this, and we have Mr. Paul Wilbur here as well.
And motion from council to approve Resolution 72-2022.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Wilbur, have we, I guess the biggest concern more than anything is how this will appear on the ballot, what you anticipate we'll find?
Right, so we're going to advertise for 5 consecutive weeks immediately before the election, and it will have the ballot question along with each section that has the amendment. So it will be a very large newspaper advertisement to give the public what I think will be substantial information, perhaps more information than they want, but it'll be there. And then on the ballot will be just the ballot question, not the section, because there's only a limited amount of space on the ballot.
Assuming that people who are curious would be able to go to the website and it'll be a link on the front page where they can immediately find that.
I would think on the county council's website,
Yeah, we can certainly include a
Yeah,
link
let's-
to the publication.
give it as much
Sure,
publicity as possible.
absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Further questions from members of the
Thank you.
council?
Just clarity, the questions, we do that on our end and then send it to the state, or is it just strictly?
Yes, I prepare the question, it's sent to the Board of Elections, it goes through the state. That will be prepared, say, in July, so that they can get the ballot ready in August.
Very good.
Yep.
I would like to recognize Mr. Mike Dunn, who was the chairperson of the Charter Review Committee, and not only did they spend hours and hours and several months reviewing this very carefully, then he had the patience to sit with the council and go through the council's deliberations, and very personally, we appreciate him for his hard work. All those in favor of Resolution 72-2022, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried, resolution passes. Thank you, Mr. Wilbur.
Okay, next is an update on the Master Water and Sewer Plan implementation phase by Mr. Peter Bozick and Mr. Willie.
Want Mr. Willie to come up front with you?
I do.
I mean to do, yeah. I wanna make
I
sure.
do. One more copy. One more copy here.
You thought you were gonna hide back there, didn't you?
Gentlemen, if you
Catherine
could-
McAllister has a family situation, so she could not be here today.
Understood.
So we got Jim Willie filling in
Out of the bullpen.
out of the bullpen.
If you could announce for the public, let us know who you are and your position, starting to my left, Mr. Pissota. Thank you.
John Pissota, Acting County Executive, Wicomico County. Good morning.
Morning.
Jim Willie, George Miles and Buer. Good morning.
Pete Bozick, engineer, George Miles and Buer.
Thank you, gentlemen. You have the floor.
All right, so we are here to give you the 6-month update on the status of the implementation steps for the Wacomico Water Sewer Master Plan. And I've got a short presentation prepared that we can go over to let you know what we've done. Our activities have been in applying for grant funding, seeking an approach to applying for a discharge permit for clean water permits, and we've been in contact or been able to connect with a fellow who works for MDE. His name is Leslie Knapp. He's an MDE employee with government relations, and he's been sort of assigned to help us navigate between the various state agencies. Our meetings thus far with the state agencies include the Maryland Department of the Environment, obviously, we got the Maryland Department of Planning, and we have the Maryland Department of Health. Those are the three agencies that we are trying to navigate through and in between. Each of those agencies have certain missions and rules and regulations, and it's going to be an iterative process to try to satisfy the goals and objectives of all three agencies. It's not too much unlike things you're dealing with the DAF situation, in Hebron, where you've got one agriculture department, environmental department, they all have different ways, and we're trying to navigate through that to come up with feasible, viable systems. But I'm going to start out, and a number of these slides that I have in the presentation on page number 2, it's our recommendations right out of the master plan. And so our first recommendations was an avenue where incorporated cities and towns that already have existing water sewer systems, that they should have some sort of flexibility built in where they can expand their infrastructure. As long as it's consistent with their municipal comprehensive plans, which are all on the record with the state, and the state's aware of that. So if they're complying with their comprehensive plans and they wish to expand and they can serve certain areas with the septic system problems, that's our first recommendation, that something be arranged so it's a mutual benefit, win-win for the county, the citizens and the citizens of the county.
Mr. Bozick, have you had any conversations with the officials in Pittsville, because they have shown some interest in expanding westward from Pittsville?
Right. Not since I saw you have your email. I responded. We're definitely open to that. We haven't had an opportunity to sit down and get to that point, but we're certainly open to that. And at any time they want to reach out and have something arranged or offer something, they've been in our mind from day one. We had 2 meetings at the beginning of the study and the end of the study. I know they're working with the ARPA money, rescue plan money. They're doing some improvements to the treatment plant. I know conceptually they got to decide between trying to Band-Aid. It's sort of like a Band-Aid, but it's more than a Band-Aid to sort of fix and maintain what they have now so it lasts another 10 years, or try to take the big step now and think bigger and try to replace with a newer, bigger system. And obviously, if they replace with a newer, bigger system, that definitely involves trying to get help from the county, because it would definitely affect county property as well. So, I don't know where they are in that process. The last time we left it before we issued the master plan was they were kind of keyed into this, use the ARPA money, fix what they have, and 10 years from now, see how things shake out, partly with the county, in terms of what the county's able to do, and then maybe revisit. So, and both on the county side, when they come to us, for us to promise what we can do or try to commit that the county, we're going to do this or that, we're still kind of in that situation. We still need discharge permits, and we still need funding from the county side.
They have discharge permits. Do you think it would be advantageous for you all to reach out to them instead of waiting for them to reach out to you? Or
I'm open, but, I know Joe Mangini, we've talked to him a few times. I feel, whether I should or shouldn't, I'm working with John, working with the county.
We will continue to evaluate and make contact with any municipality and as we progress through the plan. So,
Yeah.
yes, we will.
Our door's always open. You can come in our office anytime. We can sit down and talk for certain. And that's for all of you if you want to come and do a little work session or get into some details about anything. We're certainly open to that. So we got that. Now, the second part of the master plan was,
If they were to choose to do that, how would you, from your perspective, how would you choose and the time frame that might be involved in making that actually happen, as far as helping them decide how to set up the lines, the invoicing for the consumers, things like that?
yeah, I think that's invoicing for the consumers is really far down the line. We got to see that, the nature, character, the makeup of it. What you have, if you're expanding and they want to align with the county, then we'd look westward. They would have to look to the village of Parsonsburg and try to look at that customer base and try to serve that customer base. And one of the big advantages we saw early on is Parsonsburg is on elevation is about 10 feet higher than Pittsville. So Pittsville. So we could take advantage of granite, Vavity, and have the stuff flow down. But on the other hand, the development along Old Ocean City Road between Pittsville and Parsonsburg and Pittsville is not as dense as it is between Parsonsburg and Walston Switch Road. So that as customers come along, they would all be new growth customers, and our policy is growth pays for growth. So whatever growth happens in that corridor would have to be funded privately.
So they could actually expand west of Parsonsburg to Walston Switch, correct?
Pittsville, they can annex.
No, they wouldn't have to annex to do this.
Pittsville would not?
They wouldn't have to annex Parsonsburg or...
No, they wouldn't have to annex Parsonsburg, but I'm saying, if they want to extend their boundaries to the west, it's certainly their option. But there's not a lot of development, and there's no funding for sewers in undeveloped land. All the funding we're going after is to, 95% is to deal with existing septic system problems. So
what I'm saying is, if they were in agreement and it worked out, they wouldn't have to annex any areas that they served in the county.
I understand. Okay, yes, I understand that. If they don't have a policy, I understood in our conversations, as I recall, our conversations were, they expect annexation before service.
They would have to change.
Now, they could maybe, they're subject to change that, but by and large, pretty much all the municipalities, when we talked to them, wanted to maintain their policy of annexation before service.
I can say something here. Fruitland's policy is, you have an urban service agreement. It's with the city of Salisbury, or it's with the county, but the urban service agreement says that we have a first right to request annexation, but we don't. If we choose annexation and the developer refuses, then he doesn't get urban service. But if the city says we don't really want that, then the county can invoke the urban service, require Fruitland to cover them in the urban service. They're not annexed in that point. And that's probably what the other municipalities have won too.
You are exactly right. Yeah, you're exactly right. I simplified it too much, but yeah, exactly the way you said it, Andy, is the way that the Fruitland's been operating that way. They have the right of first refusal on terms of annexation or not annexation. So, and obviously they exemplified that with the Morris Mill situation. But
yeah, and that also means that they may be able to serve a place that is not contiguous.
Yes.
What I would recommend is I want you to go ahead and finish and
Thank you.
Get through your presentation. We'll ask questions later to make sure we don't run into a time restraint.
Okay. So really, the focus right now is really on the 5 areas for county utility districts that we proposed as a top level priority or near term that we should proceed with. Okay. So if you go to slide number 3, when it calls to the recommendation number 1, I'm just kind of backtracking a little bit, but it's showing Delmar, Salisbury, and Fruitland are the areas where we're calling urban sewers, or we have to get a strong association or actually have these cities take the lead in providing sewers to these on-site septic system areas. Now, in the rural central sewers areas, and that's what they're calling the sewers that the county implements in their districts. We're basically calling them rural central sewers, and that terminology has developed or evolved in dealing with the Maryland Department of Planning and their definition of smart growth, where they're looking at smart growth at 3.5 units per acre. And in our technical terms, we call that urban sewers. And so by and large, where the county's putting in sewers, we're not looking to put sewers in places with that urban density, but rather we call it rural density. The next slide on number 5, it just highlights for you the areas where we're applying for permits and funding. We've got 2 on the east side in Parsonsburg area in the Colburn Mill Road Community of Subdivisions area. We've got 2 on the west side with the town of Mardella Springs and environs. We've got the Nanacoke, Bivalve, Tyascan area on the west side. And then we've also got Whitehaven right down there, down on the Wicomico River, little speck. It's 35 houses or so. And, we need to contend that because of the dry weather flooding that they have. Their septic tanks experience flooding on an interval of once every month or once every 2 months. Living down there, it's like living on Fitzwater Street. Every so often it's underwater, and so those septic systems are not viable. They don't conform. They need to be flood proofed. So the implementation activities we've been doing since our last visit is we've got clean water discharge permits. We're going to do applications for funding. We intend to do or want to do the water sewer plan amendments, priority funding plan amendments, in coordination with the county council approval. We need to do watershed modeling and hydrogeological studies of different sites that we can identify as potentially suitable for groundwater discharge. And lastly, then once we get further along there, then we'll go through the process of actually creating sewer service districts. At that point, we'll be doing public engineering reports, so we have detailed cost estimates based on actual discharge locations. We'll have public hearings, potentially have referendums, and then we'll have the county council have to establish the actual boundaries of the district. What properties are in the district, what properties aren't in the district. Okay, so I'm going to just show you now what we've submitted to the state in terms of funding for funding for these projects on the priority list. It was done by the end of January. We had all these submitted for these 5 areas. We're waiting for them to issue their list on the priority list and see where we rank and how high we are on the list and what our eligibility is for funding. But we know, and what happened last year is even if we rank very high and they really want to fund the project, then we've got to come back and, as soon as we can, put the project in the water sewer plan amendments, county water sewer plan amendments, that gets approved by the Maryland Department of Planning. They approve that, while the MDE and the funding people, give us high ranking, but they won't give us any money till Maryland Department of Planning signs off on it as a water sewer plan amendment. And then they also clarify that it's a priority funding area. You cannot get money without being in a priority funding area. And if we get into loggerheads about densities and whether, the state wants us to have higher densities and we don't want to have higher densities, one other tool we have to try to qualify for funding is if we have a public health emergency, failing septic tanks. So that maybe that would come into play. But so for Parsonsburg Village, and it gets kind of back to your question, Joe Holloway, this is what we're showing to the state right now. It's on slide number 8. It's a priority funding area map. And this kind of illustrates for you 2 things. It kind of gives you, in the red line, our service area boundaries. So you can see we kind of outlined the village of Parsonsburg. We went westward along Old Ocean City Road until Walston Switch Road, and then we, turned right, went north, and picked up Sierra Manor in that high-density subdivisions. So, and that results in about 300-plus customers, and results in a project that was about $26 million project in that regard. Now, the key here is again, we got to get the discharge permit. We got to figure out, once we treat it, where we're going to put the clean water. And so we got to get permission from them to discharge either into Beaver Dam Creek, Holloway Creek, or we got to find some good draining land and try to implement a land application and a groundwater discharge permit. So this is an area where we think we're going to need to investigate groundwater discharge permits here. The elevations are nice and high throughout the county. However, even though they're high, they don't drain very well. The other thing is, depending on how eastward we go, we could be draining into, some of it drains into the Pocomoke watershed, some of it drains into the Wicomico watershed. So those things have to be factored into that discussion. The second area, and is also on the east side, that we've approached the state with, is the Colburn Mill community. And if you go to slide number 10, you will see the red outline of what's in the application. So these are public documents. They're in the funding application at the state. We've drawn a boundary, and underneath that red line, you can see some yellow shading.
Right.
And the yellow shading.
That's going to be my question. I see shaded areas, but they're not in the red.
Right. The shaded areas represent, they're in the PFA comment area. So if it was yellow, it would automatically be in the priority funding area. And most areas inside municipal limits are almost always, they're yellow, and they're priority funding areas. But once you get outside that area, and if you got the shading, it means the state is somewhat receptive, or they have some consideration that it may qualify for PFA funding. If it's not, then they have even another hurdle to get to that point. So
Just a quick question on that page 10. I noticed in that southeast portion of that, where you've outlined the red, I see it's the Fox Chase subdivisions that's left out of that.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And so is Cardinal Drive
Yeah.
on Snow Hill Road. So, yeah, there are, and once we got into the detail of everything, I don't know all the specifics of what we've done, but that's the way we've drawn the map right now.
Why would we leave out?
I'm not exactly sure how that fits into the overall economics. I do think things like that, I'm glad you mentioned, is because these boundaries can easily, at this stage, when we find out funding and discharge capacity can move.
Yeah.
They're not locked in at all.
Yeah, I would just, maybe make a notation there. I think
Yeah,
try to incorporate
definitely.
those two subdivisions, because they're
Yeah.
right there in that same.
Well, there's a lot of things like that. In every one of these service districts, it's things like that will be coming out when we do, like you say, when we do the water sewer plan amendment and bring it to you. Yeah, you might desire that we put that in there. And then if it's priority funding area and they get funding, that's, if those things all line up, it's in. And right now, it's like you say, it's real easy to move that line right now. It's not going to be that easy once you're out, when you set the sewer line and the manhole and the sewer's real shallow and they can't get to it.
Well, if we're going to move any lines, and like you said, it's easier to do it now.
Here it goes. Okay.
I'm not to, I'm not going to do. I know we're not going to do it this morning, but is that something we need to address more seriously?
Hello, everyone. Tony Fasai, Wacomico County Engineering, Public Works. Just to help on one little item. Most of these areas were developed off those growth tier maps, boundaries that everybody ends up dealing with. Some of these were using historic planning and zoning documents. Doesn't mean that they were gospel. Just like Pete said, they are subject to change, not something that we want to keep or potentially be more beneficial to modify them. The problem is the more consistency that we have with these documents, as bad as it sounds, even though they're old, the more consistency we have across the board, the more easy, the simplest path forward they are of getting approved through MDE. So
how would that be a problem?
when you have multiple departments talking to each other, it'd be great. But MDE doesn't talk to MDP. MDP doesn't exactly jive with
Not
everything.
exactly.
Yeah, it becomes an issue of correspondence going back and forth. You might end up seeing a lot of documents having to change for this to actually ever happen. So, it is a great point. I don't disagree. When a subdivision is that close by, and let's say there is existing issues that are known, it's better to pick them up. But the problem is that they're already a comment area, so MDP is considering that potentially already an issue for them on their behalf. So it's just keep something in the back of your mind that If you see that, yes, it's a potential boundary that we've outlined, but is an option that we'll have to address at some point. So MDE and MDP is one of the hurdles that we'll have to take.
Yep. Yeah, planning maps tend to draw their boundaries right down a roadway, a certain road. You're on this side of the road, you're in, you're on that side of the road, you're out. But when it comes to putting sewers down the road, if there's houses on both sides, you want to pick up houses on both sides, so we can work those things out. Tony did work extremely closely with Catherine. He's on top of all these maps and figures. When we put the applications together, he knows the details. He's asked all the right questions. He's on top of what we're trying to do and helping us be proactive with the state and move this thing forward. Then we go to Mardella Springs. Okay, so we've got Mardella Springs area here. You can see right in the center of town, you see the yellow area, that's Mardella. Obviously, that's a priority funding area, so that's definitely would qualify for funding. Then you see a number of areas that are with the yellow hatch. That's that's a certain area where they'd like us to zone that to 3.5 units per acre, but it doesn't seem like it's page number 12.
Okay, because I was looking at 11 for Mardella and didn't see any yellow.
Was this taking into consideration?
Oh, yeah.
I think in the original plan, that Hebron would take a role in helping with Mardella Springs needs?
Not yet, no. But we haven't got to that level. Whether if it makes any sense for Mardella and Hebron to regionalize, into some type of a joint town-county relationship. It's not out of the realm of possibility. We're going to see what happens with a discharge permit. Right now, the county has a discharge permit into Bering Creek for the high schools. So if there's additional load capacity, and when we look at it, in the water quality in the Nanticoke River, we have decisions to make about how much load goes into Bering Creek versus how much load goes into Wacomico Creek. So yeah, if we have Hebron helping Mardella, and Mardella sends their sewer to Hebron, well then that ultimately discharges into Wacomico Creek. So we're going to need to balance all that out. In addition to like this whole thing's going to be really a collaborative joint effort. With we got to keep between our county residents, I guess, are priority number one. But we've got to work with municipalities. We have to work with all the environmental groups and make sure that we're on the right side of all the environmental groups who have important things to add to this equation. I really even think like there's a chance where we really need to try to work with conservation groups, land conservation groups, because we need to look for and see if we have opportunities where people are conserving land or woodlands where they could benefit by having some water sprayed there. If that's better for the environment than a stream discharge. And if the land's never going to be developed anyway, maybe that's a win-win. But there's a lot of constituencies here that we all have to work together on. So then after Mardella, on the west side, we got Nanticoke, Bivalve, Tyaskin. I'll go back. Mardella right now is about a $35 million project that we're projecting for about 300 customers. In the Tyaskin area, we're looking at about 600 some customers that are there that are developed, and it's about a $65 million project right now. But those three areas, the other thing that comes into play, not only do they have small lot sizes, they have some it's sporadic density here and there, and there are ways, but they also have climate change issues associated with Nanticoke bivalve, sea level rise and flooding and those types of considerations, which help secure more funding generally. So, and it may take longer for that whole project to come together to where you actually can build it, but we need to start now. We feel like we need to start now in that regard. Then we actually have two maps that represent the priority funding areas, and as you see there, we really don't have anything yellow. We have it in this grayish shading, this dark gold shading, which is rural village. And I'm not really sure, where that fits into the Maryland Priority Funding Program. But I think our discussions with the state and with MDE and the on-site people, I think in the state, I think is coming to term with this is that, on one hand, you'd think that maybe if you put advanced septic tanks or the best available technology septic tanks and everybody individually put in a treatment unit that removes some nitrogen. We found out there's a fatal flaw in that regard because the drain fields don't work. The groundwater's too high. So even if you cleaned it up to a level, you still can't get it into the ground. Into the watershed. So in that case, we're looking to, to generate these rural central sewers, pressure pipes, small diameter, shallow depth, just serving primarily the people who are there. And then finally, Whitehaven, it's a small area in desperate need, and that's, and that's we got the estimate right now pegged at $6 million. But, and that's assuming right now primarily that would discharge into the, into the Wacomico River. Their discharge right now, we project they're discharging from their septic systems, are discharging about 600 pounds of nitrogen per year. And if we treated it to the ENR standards, the discharge would be reduced to about 100 pounds per year. Or we'd look for a permit that would allow the discharge of 100 or 200 pounds per year. So it would reduce it by a factor of 3.
I was under the understanding that MDE was not doing any more discharge permits into tidal water.
Good point. And yes, we've got those overtures from them when we've talked about it. They say, no, we don't. There's no load. They say there's no load allocated under the TMDLs. We don't do it. And we asked them to write us a letter and say, you prohibit discharges. They won't write us a letter saying they prohibit discharges. So, so we're kind of caught between that, but they think what they want us to do, and I recognize that, and it's a valid reason. They want us to make sure that we can't find a spray irrigation site that's environmentally acceptable. But as we look at properties in that area of the county and try to get past the wetlands to higher elevations, we're ended up 4, 5, or 6 miles, to where, to almost to Pirates Wharf, where we would have to take that sewage to find land that I think gives us a reasonable chance of getting it permitted. So, and that extra cost is not really factored into what we're showing right now. That could be, another $2 or $3 million just by itself. So, yeah, we're trying to just to get straight with MDE. There's no need to supply a permit for stream discharge or tidal discharge if they're going to turn it down at the end of the day. And if they are, then we don't need to waste our money doing water quality modeling or that type of thing. But what we do know is, based on their on-site septic system regulations and their loads and the amount of flooding that we have, they project, 80% of the septic loads from the septic systems are going right into the Wacomico River right now, and that calculates out to be 600 pounds a year. So we're proposing a system that's going to reduce that to between 100 and 200 pounds per year, and will they entertain that and consider it or not? And that's kind of like we're going to talk about a little bit when we're trying to get to the point where we submit applications. We want to give us more of a read or more definition of what you're asking, Bill, before we submit the application.
How many properties did you say were in Whitehaven?
Right now, we have, I think I have like 36 existing properties. And, with some unbuilt lots there, and that translates, into, 7,000 or 8,000 gallons a day of sewage. And so if we built a system, we might build it for 10,000, maybe build it for 15,000 gallons a day to have some sort of safety factor. So, maybe, because within the realm of construction and sizing of pipes and tanks and we might have a 5 or 10,000, gallon capacity. And when I say 5 or 10,000, in the big scheme of things, that seems like very minuscule amount of extra capacity. But if you put it in terms of percentages, you're looking at like 50% more capacity, and that sounds like you're accommodating growth. So those are some of the nuances that people have to figure out. Is 17 more houses than are there right now, is that constitute sprawl growth or not? But, but conceptually, we're just trying to make something that's practical and affordable.
At the moment, that's $167,000 per.
Absolutely. So, but again, all sewer systems, that were put in, I don't care what are the towns, municipalities, everybody, generally sewer systems are put in with federal and state money at the beginning. It's a huge capital cost. And I can tell you, every single one in this county, Hebron, Pittsville, Willard, all those places, they were done with a large infusion of state and EPA money. So and we're at a point now in this country, between climate change and care for the environment and the American Rescue Plan Act, the money's there. That's what the BIL is a term that's coming out with some money. That's called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, BIL. So they have programs, where they're trying to put money back into the communities in this country, to renew our infrastructure. So, in order to qualify, there's money. It's going to take cooperation between planning department, the environmental department, the health department, and so.
Just to add a point to that, even though we're seeing issues, you're breaking down the dollars and cents every second. I understand that completely. Absolutely. The biggest thing is if we don't have that discharge permit or a place to put it, there really isn't a dollar value.
At this point,
I will say it though like this: the longer you kick the can, and not saying you guys, I'm just saying, as long as that issue continues to grow, continues to get pushed along, the longer the issue is going to get worse and worse. Yeah. And then, I'm just being drastic. I'm not trying to say it to be facetious or anything, but the worst case scenario is we end up with groundwater contamination and what happens to wells, and then we have to figure out how to treat that, and that's the last thing we want to see. So, trying to be economically feasible, best for the health and environment, and the best way we can move forward. We all know it's got to be affordable. If not, we're just going to go broke trying.
If we go through this whole process of discharge permits, et cetera, I think the one thing, where are we going to establish the carrot for the consumer? Because you need volume, and we know we had trouble even with volume in Morris Mill, and we were trying to help them with their own issues. So how are you going to create that problem? Let's say you go to the Whitehaven area and say, here's what we have. We've got everything in order. We have the funding, and you have 10 out of the 40 who say they want to hook up. I'm trying not to get the cart in front of the horse.
No.
The only thing that I could say to add, and it's not cut Pete off, is you got to remember property values. When somebody has a failing septic, you can't sell that property.
I know, but you have to appeal to all these people at the same time.
I understand completely. And at some point in those areas, there's going to be that situation's going to come up. I'm going to use Whitehaven as an example. No one's addressing the problem in the room, but all the septics are underwater. They're all failing. They don't comply by any law. But I understand people still live there. But same thing happens inland as it does out by the water. I'm not saying we want to go out in there and survey every well, but I'm sure to some degree, if we tested most of the wells on the Eastern Shore, there's something in them. The degree of what we're doing it is probably going to be seen more at the town level because of the water usage. But the thing that's sad is at some point in time, the carrot, what cookie you give them to incentivize is going to be what services you provide these people and to what degree. Do we give them water and sewer? Do we give them water, sewer, and streetlights?
I wouldn't want to reinvent the wheel. Pete, are you familiar with any other areas that have had to take these drastic measures?
Well, pretty much every area when they were built were facing the same things we're facing. We're not reinventing the wheel, or we're not unique in that regard. Pretty much all the towns, when they built theirs, they had the same issues that you're talking about. it's not just a carrot, it's also a stick. It's going to be a carrot and a stick approach. And I keep trying to impress and get everybody to look at it more holistically in terms of there's public health involved, there's the environmental protection involved, and there's everybody's pocketbooks involved. So there's always those three things. So that's what has to come into play. This is it's a quality proposition that we're trying to do. And the people's property values, is going to be huge. They're going to be faced with, if you're faced, if you have creating a public health crisis because your system's failing and it's polluting your well, you could face eviction from your house. That's a hell of a stick. But, you got the carrot and stick approach. It's all there, but it's always going to be there. You got the public health issues, you got environmental issues, and obviously you got the financial issues, no doubt about it. So
I think a little bit to answer that question a little bit, I think at the state, well, I know at most local legislative levels, if there's a public availability that exists, and then you have a failed system, then you have to connect to the available.
it happened in Morris Mill. It happens here.
Right.
It also happens with like USDA and certain funding. They'll give you money, but once you take money for these district, everyone has to connect. And the other part, because unless you do that, you can't really do the economics of what people are going to pay unless you know your customer base. And if that's fluctuating all the time, half are in or half are out, then the rates these people are paying could go up and down accordingly.
We have about 5 minutes, gentlemen.
Okay.
John, just to say real quick.
Tony, you explained it very well, too. I think when you said that if we don't do this, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, the end result at the end of the day, you have to have public participation, right? So if the end result, let's say, majority of the people in that subdivision or majority of the people in that area don't want to be served, the people are going to speak on their own behalf. We can't make them do anything at the end of the day. But you have to remember at the 25, 30, 100 years from now, we're probably not even going to be on this earth, but the people that will be back at that point will say, all right, well, what did these people leave us with? I mean, I'm still correcting issues for some of my predecessors. What degree do we fix it? But that's neither here nor there. It's a two-sided thing. If they want it, great, we can provide it. If they don't want it, they're left with what they got. I mean, I don't know how else to.
We have to have volume, so I don't know if you can.
Density increases feasibility. I agree with that. Yeah.
I've got the same type of questions, but we really do need to move on.
Yeah.
And I have to wait for my questions, if you don't mind.
Well, we're just about at the end. If you go to slide number 20, which is the implementation matrix, and we're looking at, phases and steps that we're taking. And right now, we're in phase 1. And in that first phase, we broke it down into 3 sort of tracks that we have to follow. We have a management track, we have a financial track, and we have the technological track. And, on the management side, this master plan's been accepted by the county council, so that part, we've accomplished. The next track or something that's going to come to you is the things with what do we call it, the enabling legislation, but it's going to have to be packages that we put together with you in terms of this is a water and sewer amendment area, priority funding area, and that kind of thing. And so we'll need your support in approving those. We've gone through the process of 5 applications throughout the county for systems. The state's looking to those. I've talked to different people at the state. I'm not too sure what they're going to do. They tell me they're in a quandary. They got a lot of expensive requests. They're looking at what we're trying to do and value engineer it and where the load capacity is. And, they like to maybe dictate to us, or they might want everything to go through Salisbury or Fruitland. And at some point, if we don't do anything or propose something, state can come down and tell us, we want you to do this, lay the heavy hand. But I'm not saying anything, specific right now, but it's potential. So then on our technological side, we're trying to get focused on getting permits done. Now, one of the things we've done in terms of the county, the water division, so the county, John, Tony, we budgeted $350,000 for trying to obtain these permits. We want to put an RFP out, We want to get the consultants or the legal people, you know, the river, the watershed modelers and the hydrogeologists, so we can provide the supporting scientific data to go along with our permit applications. We want to start that as soon as we can. I mean, we knew we were kind of waiting for July 1 for the fiscal year to start. The money's in the budget, and, you know, we want to put out an RFP and get specialized consultants on board to apply for these permits. And so the next steps, you know, will be once we find out where we stand with permits and funding, then we're going to start getting serious about which of these 5 projects kind of we put more emphasis on 1, 2, 3, 4. If something's holding up one of the projects, then while that's being resolved, we'll work on the other projects. And then, you know, when it comes to creating districts, then we'll get a little bit more refined in our cost estimates and our mapping, so that when it gets presented to the public, you know, you can have a good dialogue with the public in terms of who's in and who's out and what the costs are going to be. And so, yep, in a nutshell, the last slide, it's the enabling legislation, it's doing the water quality studies, the hydro studies, and then getting to specific engineering cost estimates.
Thank you for the presentation. Sorry about the time limitations. I would want to recognize Alan Gerard. He's the Eastern Shore Director with Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Thank you for being here, Alan. I think the Chesapeake Bay Foundation could be a very good partner, a really good partner for Wacomico County.
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, we really need their input, so we're not going off in a direction that's going to come back, you know, against us.
Any other questions?
I think there's a lot of questions.
There are, I know. It's yeah.
It's an iterative process. It's going to go back and forth. We're going to go down one avenue as far as we can, then we're going to back up and go another avenue.
Maybe a time frame is when we would be able to get together again?
I would hope it's soon, since you said that we need
Yeah,
to do something sooner than better.
You know, as soon as we get this, you know, request for proposals and get a consultant on board and, you know, bring contracts in to do these studies, you know, that'll give you some more meat on the bones, I guess you could say, in terms of what we're actually doing and see how things are shaping up. And unless, you know, we certainly need further discussions with state planning. And, you know, we need contingency plans for the health department, you know, what they're doing in the interim while we are, you know, trying to get these projects together. And obviously, we definitely need input with the municipalities to see, you know, where they stand on their programs that'll solve some of these on-site septic system problems that are in their planning area.
Just last thing I say, it could be nice maybe to get all the municipalities and all of us together in a room with you all to have one, like, you know, I think we've done that at the Civic Center or something like that, but I'm sure they're going to start to have a lot of questions. And I don't know the best way to get everyone to answer the questions at one time or to hear each other, but maybe that's an option you might want to consider.
Mm-hmm.
If you could supply this on a PDF for us, we'd appreciate it. Something we can maybe put on the website, because we have so many questions from the community.
Okay.
It'd be good to keep them updated as well.
No problem.
That would be great. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mr. President, that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Morning, Mr. Mitchell.
Good morning. This is introduction of legislative bill 2022-08, an act authorizing and empower Wacomico County, Maryland to borrow on the faith and credit of Wacomico County, Maryland on aggregate principal amount not exceeding $23,378,386, and to evidence such borrowing by the issue and sale from time to time of one or more series of general obligation bond to the county, the proceeds thereof to be used by Wacomico County to finance, refinance, reimburse cost of certain projects for general services, work, community college, the Board of Education, Public Works, and the airport, including cost of planning, design, acquisition, construction, improvement, installation, renovation, rehabilitation, repairing, furnishing, and equipment, and equipping of land, facilities, buildings, and structures, together with other costs and financing costs related thereto, as further described in the full version of the resolution. That's in the brief book.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Entertain a motion from council to introduce legislative bill number 2022-08.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Mrs. Ohl, I know you're here today. Thank you.
Good morning. This is an introduction of the bill to start the process to bond for these items. We have a calendar created such that we would go to the market prior to the general election, so that these would happen with the term of this council. So the intention would be we would go to market and council. So this would be first reading of this legislation, second reading, hopefully,
July 20th.
on July 20th. And then we would come to council the second meeting in October for you to accept the award. So we're moving up the process so that it doesn't cross over the election.
Questions from council members?
Probably make good economic sense to be moving up the process anyhow.
Correct. So we are starting the process of putting together the presentations to go to the market.
Questions from council? Seeing none. All those in favor of the introduction of legislative bill number 2022-08, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. The introduction of legislation bill number 2022-08 passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. This time, we open the floor for public comments. If you have any comments you'd like to make, come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and your concern. No, Mrs. O'Shea. Okay, thank you. Council comments. Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you.